Welcome to Machine Coding Interview. I am Sanjay, and in this course we will discuss the evaluation criteria for bill sharing system. So let's understand the evaluation criteria one by one. So first we have to use the OOPS and solid principles in our application. So let's see that we are following OOPS and solid principles or not. So what do you mean by OOPS principles? So it should follow abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. So are we following this principle? So yes, we are following OOPS principle. If you open any class, then you will see that we are following all the principle of OOPS. Like one principle is abstraction. Okay. So what do you mean by abstraction? Abstraction means showing only what is necessary to the client. So let's open any class. So if you'll open services, so in the services, you can see that we have lots of public classes, right? So we have this create expenses, we have this get expenses, we have the update expenses, we have the delete expenses, get expenses. Okay, so these are the public class which is exposed to the client. Okay, but there are also some classes where we are using the private methods. Okay, so let's open. So here you can see that we are using the create expense class, we are using the create paid by expenses. Okay, and here we are using the public classes which is said expense in the group. So we are exposing this method, but we are hiding this methods. It means we are following the abstraction of OOPS principle. The second principle is encapsulation. So encapsulation means using all the properties and behavior in one class. So here you can see that we have this private methods, group repository, user repository, expense repository. So this all are private. Okay, we have this private properties like group repository, user repository, and expense repository, and all the other properties. These are private. And we have this public methods also. So we have the properties and methods inside one class. So that is following the encapsulation. And then we have the polymorphism. So what do you mean by polymorphism? Polymorphism means there can be multiple forms of a particular method, right? Means we can use the runtime polymorphism or we can use the compile time. So we are using runtime polymorphism in our application. What do you mean by runtime application? Means the method should be overridden by the subclasses. Okay, so you can see we have all these interfaces which has these methods, and these methods are being overridden by their subclasses, right? So we are using override, means we are using runtime polymorphism. We are not using compile time polymorphism because we did not get any case where we could have used it. Okay, so what is compile time polymorphism? Means if we are using get balance here with two parameters and the double as a return type, there can be one more parameter get balance with three parameters which will be having the same return type. So that would be called as compile time polymorphism. But we did not get any use case for using the compile time polymorphism. So if you find any use case where one method can be used in multiple forms, then you can use the compile time polymorphism in your application. So all the principle of OOPS we are following. Now we will check for the solid principles. Okay, so in the solid principle, the first principle is single responsibility principle. So are we following the single responsibility? Are we following the single responsibility principle in our application? So let's see all the directories first. Okay, so in the builders directory, we have only expense builder. In the controllers directory, we have only the controllers. In the DTOs directory, we have only the DTOs. In the enums directory, we have only the enums. In the exceptions directory, we have only the exceptions. In the factories directory, we have only the factories. In the models directory, we have only the models. In the repositories, we have only the repositories. And in the services, we have only the services, right? In the strategy, we have the strategy as well as registry. So this can be split up into two directories. One is strategy directory and one is the registry directory. So this can be improved, but other than this, all the other directories are following the SRP. Now we will check whether the files are following the SRP. So let's open the expense builder. So in the expense builder, you can see that we are building only expenses, okay, which is the main task of creating the expense builder, right? So this is following the SRP. In the expense controller, we have the methods related to the expenses only. So we have create expense, we have get expense, we have update expense, we have delete expense, we have get expense by user. So all the methods are related to expenses only. In the group controller, you can see that we have this create group, we have get group, we have get all groups, we have the update group, we have delete group, we have add participants in the group, we have make admins in the group, okay, and then we have add expense in the group. So all these methods are related in the group only, and then we have this method for the settling of the group. So all the methods are related to the group only, right? So these two methods like get balance and get user total balance, so these are for a particular group only. For a group, user can get his balance, okay. This method can be moved to some other class which can be called as the balance controller. So this is the area of improvement that we have found here, okay. So if you want to follow proper srp, then you can remove this method, and you can also remove this method. So these two methods can be moved to balance controller if you want to use the proper srp in our application. Then in the user controller, we should have all the methods related to user only. So the register user, get all users, update user, delete user, get user by email, get user by phone. So this all methods are related to the user only. So this is properly following the SRP. Okay, and this model by default follows the SRP because this have just the properties. Then we have the enums which also contains the property. The expense has just the methods, so it is not violating any SRP because we have only constructors. In the group factory, we can check whether it is following SRP or not. So in the group factory, we have one method which is used for creating a group. Okay, so this is following the SRP because the task of group factory is create group only. Have to pay factories should create have to pay objects. Paid by factories should create paid by objects. User factories should create user objects. So these four files are following the SRP. Now we have the models. So in the models, we cannot use the SRP because they just contain the properties. In the repositories, we have the repositories only, and we don't have lots of custom methods inside this. So here you can see that we have only one method, find by expense ID. So what it is finding? It is finding all the have to pay expenses, which should be part of this have to pay repository. So this is following SRP. If we had multiple methods here, which should be returning something else other than have to pay expenses, then I think we could have considered for separating those methods from this have to pay expense repository. So right now this is following SRP because there is only one method and which is returning the have to pay list. The same thing we have for the paid by expenses. Settle up transaction is using the default methods. User repository is using the default JPA methods. So this repository is also following the SRP. Now we can check the interfaces. So let's open the interfaces. In the balance service interface, we have the balance related methods only like get balance and get user total balance. In the configuration service, we have the get settle up strategy. Okay, so this is for getting the configuration. So this is also following the SRP. The third interface is expense service interface. So this expense service interface has all the method related to the expenses. So you can check this: add expense in group, create expense, get expense, update expense, delete expense, and get expenses by user. So this is following the SRP because we have all the methods related to the expense only. The next interface is group service interface. So here we have all the methods related to the groups. So you can see we have create group, we have add participants for a group, we have get group, we have make admins for a group, we have get all groups, we have update groups, we have delete group. So here also we have all the methods related to a particular group. By seeing this make admins and add participants, you might get confused, right? Because here we have not used any word called group. But if you will see, then this method is also used for a group. Here we are adding participants in the group, and here we are making the admins for a particular group. So every time just don't look up by name, see how this is logically connected to the group. So since this methods are performing the operations on a group, we can say that this is also fulfilling the SRP principle. Now we have the settlement service interface, which has the settle-up method and user service interface. So this has all the methods related to the user. Register user, get all users, update user, delete user, get user by mail, and get user by phone. So these all methods are related to the user. So this is also following the SRP principle. Now these services are just the implementation of this. So since we have checked the interface, so they are just implementing the methods of the interfaces. So this is also following SRP principle. The strategy can be improved as said earlier because we have strategy and registry. So we can segregate the strategy and registry in different directories. Then it will follow the proper SRP, right? So yeah, one thing we can check what method do we have in settle-up strategy. So it has only one method, settle-up. So since this is the only method and this is used only for the settle-up strategy, this is following the SRP. And this mean max settle-up strategy is the concrete class of settle-up strategy. This strategy registry has only one method, which is for giving the strategies. Okay, so this is also following the SRP. Okay, so our application is following the single responsibility principle. So is our application is following open closed principle? Yes, our application is following that because we are using the strategy design pattern. And how this is following? So this settle-up strategy is extended by this mean max settle-up strategy. If you have some other strategies in mind, like if you want to settle up by using the equal distribution, then you can create a class equal. If you also want to create a class which is intelligent settle-up strategy, which sees the financial condition of all users and based on that it uses some percentage, then you can create one more class which is intelligent settle-up strategy, and you can use any of the settle-up strategies in place of this settle-up strategies, right? So first let's see where we are using this settle-up method. So first we'll find where we are using the settle-up method. So our settle-up method is getting used in the settle-up service. So let's open the settle-up service. Yeah. So here we have this settlement service. Okay, and in the settlement service we have this settle-up method. So in the settle-up method you can see that we are getting the strategy from configuration service, right? We are getting the settle-up strategy and then we are calling the settle-up method on that strategy. So you can use other settle-up strategy by using the application properties. So if you will see configuration service dot get settle-up strategy, it is getting the settle-up strategy from the strategy registry dot get method. And how it is getting the key for that? It is getting key for that from this value, right? And this is the value from the application dot properties file. So if you'll open the application dot properties file, then we have this key which is getting used in our registry. So we can use some other strategy here like equal settle-up strategy or intelligent settle-up strategy, and then that settle-up strategy will be used here inside this method, right? It will get that settle-up strategy and it will use the settle-up method of that strategy. So our application is open for extension, means we can plug in different logic. We can plug in the logic of intelligent settle-up strategy or equal settle-up strategy, right? So our application is open for extension, but we cannot change this code. If you will change this code, then our entire logic will be changed. So our application is open for extension and closed for modification. The third principle of solid principle is Lisco substitution principle. So what does Lisco substitution principle says? It says that all the superclass object can be replaceable by the subclass object, right? So here we are using the settle-up strategy interface, and for this interface we have various implementations, like we can have min-max settle-up strategy, we can have intelligent settle-up strategy, we can have the equal settle-up strategy. So any of this object can be used here, and that is what the Lisco substitution principle says. When the Lisco substitution principle will be violated, so suppose if we have created three concrete classes for this settle-up strategy, right? One is min-max settle-up strategy, one is equal settle-up strategy, and one is intelligent settle-up strategy. And those settle-up strategy are, even though implementing this settle-up method, but they are not implementing that correctly and they are giving some different out, or they are giving some exceptions, right? So they are not performing what they are expected to do. So in that case, this will be violating the list code substitution principle. But in our case, we have only used one concrete class, which is min max settle up strategy, and that is properly settling up group expenses. So we are following the list code substitution principle here. Now the next principle is interface segregation principle. So we have seen that all the interfaces have only the methods which are related to that particular object. So balance service interface has balance related method. Expense service interface has expense related method. So we are properly following the interface segregation principle. The last principle is the dependency inversion principle. So what does dependency inversion principle says? It says that all the higher level modules like controllers or the interfaces should interact with the higher level modules only. They should depend on the high level modules, not the low level modules. So if you open our controller is a high level module because it is not dependent on the concrete classes and it is just orchestrating in our application. Means it is getting the request and it is forwarding the request. Okay, that's why this is a high level module. So here in the controller, you can see that we are using the interface and that interface is injected in this controller constructor. In the group controller also, you can see that we have multiple reference variable which are type of interface, right? In the user controller also, we are using this user service interface. So controllers are dependent on the interfaces and all these controllers are dependent on the interfaces which are high level module and all these high level modules. So we have these implementations of the high level modules, right? So we have these methods of this high level module. Let's open any of them. So here you can see that we are using repositories and this repository is again an interface. So here in user service, we have this user repository. In the group service, let's open the group service. So here we have all these repositories and this all the repositories are the interfaces only, right? So the controller is dependent on the repository. So by default, by using the MVC architecture, we are following the dependency inversion principle in our application, right? Because the controller is dependent on the services, which is an interface. The services are dependent on the repositories, which is an interface. So all the high level modules are dependent only on the high level modules. Okay. So we are following all the principle of this solid principle. Now let's see which all other principles we are using. So we are using the registry design pattern in our application by using this strategy registry, okay, which is registering all the strategies. We are using the strategy design pattern by using this settle up strategy and min max settle up strategy. We are using the builder design pattern for creating the expense object, okay, and then we are using factory design pattern where we are creating the simple objects like group, have to pay, paid by and user factory. So we are using these four design patterns in our application. Okay, let's see what other evaluation criteria do we have. So we have clean code because we have created a directory structure and all the directories have its relevant files. Our code is testable because we have written all the test cases which are covering our application. Use of oops. So yes, we are following oops that I have explained in point 1. Use of design patterns. So we are using 4 design patterns in our application. So yeah, that's it from this class. See you in the next class. Thank you.